Good afternoon, EC students. Today we're going to be taking a quick look at some phrasal verbs, more specifically phrasal verbs with this extra piece off. And often when we get to around high intermediate, we start becoming more familiarized with these different kinds of verbs. They're not just standard verbs like to do or to make. Yeah? Often phrasal verbs, they have not one but maybe two parts, and often the meaning of these phrasal verbs is not always as literal as something like this, to make. It's just not, you know. It's not as clear or predictable, we might say. Usually the meaning is very subtle. It's something that you might have heard of, but on paper, not really. It's too difficult. So today we're going to break it down, and I'm going to give you some examples about how we can learn phrasal verbs effectively and how we can use them when writing in English. Let's start with a basic one, okay? Here we have to cool off, and this really means to cancel. So instead of using this main verb cancel, I can say, maybe, this evening I would like to cool off my soccer game. That is, I would like to cancel my soccer game. It's nice and clear, it's nice and simple, and the best way to remember phrasal verbs with two parts is to kind of picture them in your head as these fixed expressions, like any other piece of vocabulary. And you can do this just in a word bank or your workbooks. You jot it down. So to cool off, to cancel. So we know now that instead of using this verb, which we are already familiar with, we can apply something slightly more difficult, yeah, of a higher level, such as to cool off. Let's take a look at another example. To pay off. Well, you're thinking, I've seen this verb before. It's related to money. So what kinds of nouns, what kinds of things do we pay off? Well, for starters, we can pay off, say, a credit card. Often, when we have credit cards, we are in lots of debt. Yeah. So, to pay off could translate as to remove or, slightly higher level, eradicate one's debt, one's credit card debt for that matter. So what do? We place all of this into our word bank. We organise these kind of fragmented pieces of language and we put them in a form that's easy to remember. Because now your teacher's probably giving you this kind of language and it's not always that clear. So just like you, I need to use my whiteboard, use the space, and make sure that this is understandable. And there it is. It's on the whiteboard. What's another phrasal verb with off we might like to put on the board? Well, what about this? To show off. To show off. often one we like to see when we're with our friends, maybe sporting events, we see certain athletes maybe show off. What does it mean? To try and impress, or rather, to try to impress. Either or. So we're going to put it down. We'll write it again. So we have our three examples, our three phrasal verbs with off. And now comes the difficult part. We want to put them in sentences, yeah, around different nouns and adjectives that are grammatically correct, and by using these effectively you can score quite high on your level test, especially if you choose the second part of the writing task, and that is often something more creative. So for those of you who kind of prefer this style of writing, maybe, pay close attention and you'll hopefully improve from this. Henry decided to pay off his credit card. That is, Henry decided to remove the debt from his credit card. Yeah? It's usually a good thing. And here we see that decided, ed, is in the past tense, but we've got this infinitive, and we can see that the phrasal verb stays in a present kind of form. Okay? Now, not always will we see the phrasal verbs as simple as this. Sometimes when we're writing, we need to change the form into something that is more complex. Let's take another example. Jamie is always showing off in front of his friends. You see this ing? So we've taken show off, we know that means trying to impress, and we've added this ing suffix. We've made it continuous. And here we can see that phrasal verbs are really unique because they have this ability to kind of adapt in the way that fits our existing tense on the paper. So we've had a look at show off with the ing. We've looked at pay off, and we kept that in the present and we used an infinitive. So what about cool off? How can we use a more different form maybe? Well, why don't we stick to something simple in the past? Yeah. Put it there. Okay. Here we see ed, and we have after heavy rain, we decided to cool off the soccer match. Now, we wanted to put cool off in the past tense, but here because we have this to, it's an infinitive. We need to change it. Yeah? This is not putting a phrasal verb with two parts in the past. So we can make it more simple. We can simplify this. After heavy rain, we called off the soccer match. And here we can see that we placed it with an ed ending. It is a regular verb, and as a result, here we have to call off in the past simple. Now, I hope this has been useful for you today, and maybe in the future we'll see some new phrasal verbs with a different second part, whether it's off, up, maybe on. Okay? That's all for now, and I'll see you soon.